Hello,
Hi,
I'm Mariette Baba from Sengana,
and I'm Wilson Anaba from Presby Agricultural Station.
and we are here to take you through our experiences with the two-scale financial reporting template.
I will be taking you through the service agreement and what to look for in the service agreement, and also the do's and don'ts of the reporting templates.
And I will be taking you through the detailed financial reporting template of the two-scale financial report.
We have been working with two-scale for the past 5 years, and I'm pleased to share our experience with you. Two-scale project, before you become a partner, you would have signed a service agreement with them to become a partner. And as finance officers, what we need to do after we have received our contract or our service agreement, we need to look at certain key areas. One, you need to look at the budget and be sure that all that you have budgeted for, you understand and you are able to follow it to do your spending. Two, you also need to look at the timelines, the tranches, because the funds will be transferred to you in tranches, and you have to look at that. Thirdly, you also look at the ending date of the contract, very important. And what I must emphasize is that these dates are kept there for you to follow them as and when they are due. Because if you are not able to submit your reports before the timelines, it will be difficult for them to transfer any funds to you. You also need to find a dedicated account meant for the two-scale project. This is to help you do your reconciliation, correct mistakes with your bank, and do your financial report with the bank statement that you have taken. So it's good you have a dedicated account. The contract comes with a financial reporting template, which my colleague will be talking about it, and you need to study it and be cautious about it. When the funds are disbursed, because usually you send a request for the funds to be disbursed, and when the funds are disbursed, there are certain controls you have to put in place to be able to manage the funds without problems. And one, you need to always look for the authorizing officers, because when it comes, the officer in the field will have to do, or the officer in charge of the project will have to do his request or make his request for funds to be disbursed. And when it comes, usually it comes to the finance office, and the finance office reviews or they check to see if it is matching with the budget. And when the finance office is done, it's sent to the authorizing officer or the manager to also check and approve. When this is done, it comes back to the finance office for the checks to be raised for disbursement. When disbursements are done, what happens is that the field officers or the officer, the desk officer of the two-scale project sends the funds to the field. It uses the money or the funds to do the activities. When the activities are carried out, whatever activity, for example, if you are going to buy fuel, if you are going to pay TNT, whatever activity you are carrying out, you make sure that you get receipts for them. Some of the receipts could be official receipts, some of them could be acknowledgement, some can be honest certificates. So when they bring them to you as the finance officer at the point of retiring the expenditure, then you need to cross-check to be sure that whatever they are submitting to you, you have control of it, and be sure that they are good receipts, they are good invoices and all that, so that you don't run into problems. Because one day, the funds that they have given you, you account for them, and you will use same invoices, same receipts to account for them. I would also like to say that when these receipts are being vetted or they are looked at and you are satisfied, you may clear the officer to do another activity. And these things are posted, the expenditure he has done, they are posted to the template. As I was saying, in the contract or the service agreement, you will have Annex C, which my colleague will be explaining. When you get all the necessary documents, you then use it to prepare your reports. And when you prepare the reports, you make sure you sign. You also send it to the authorizing officer or your manager to also sign. When that is done, it means that you are good to go, and you can then scan together with the receipts and send to the two-scale project. When you do not study your documents well and you send to them, it will be on and off, because two-scale has to be sure that what you have sent to them is good enough to be able to do the second disbursement. Be serious in whatever you are doing as finance officers, so that you will always be in the good books of your partners.
SEN Ghana has been in partnership with the two-scale project for the past 7 years. We have partnered in the implementation of the soybean and also the establishment of the Village Savings and Loans Association projects. I hope you have enjoyed the session from our colleague at PASGARO. I am here to take you through the financial reporting template of the two-scale project. The financial reporting template for the two-scale project contains 3 main components, including the summary, the detailed financial report, then also the private sector contribution. Let me take you through the detailed financial reporting sheet. When you open the detailed financial report, on top of the report, you will see the year. The year is talking about the year of implementation. Then we have a column for installment. Normally, the IFDC project comes with the tranche payment. They don't pay the money 100%, they pay it in percentages. So let's assume that we are working with the first tranche and we are implementing a project for the year 2018. So under the column of the year, you type in 2018. Then under the column for the installment, we are dealing with the first tranche. So you type in first installment or first tranche, whichever. Then when you come down, the next item online is the name of the ABC. So you can, for instance, we can use the name of the cluster, Banda Burai, for example. You type Banda Burai there. Then the name of the reporting BSS. The reporting BSS is the organization that is partnering in the implementation process. So here the BSS will be SEN Ghana. Then when you scroll down, you will now see the detailed template, which is divided into 3 main parts. On your extreme left, you see the column for the expenditure in details. Then in the middle contains the expenses. Then at your extreme right, we see the various sources of contributions there. Let's come down and start with an activity. Assuming we are setting up a VSLA group. So our activity under the templates will be, let's assume that activity in our budget is activity 1. So the description will be establishment of VSLAs. We will need a box, a padlock, stamp pad, stamps, and passbooks. So, and this all comes with a budgeted amount. So you enter it at the column per each line. Then when you are done, automatically the template is there with a formula. You will see that all will sum up and come to the budget per activity column to give you the total amount that is budgeted for these particular activities. Then when that is done, you look at your retirement, how much was actually spent on the purchase of these materials. Then you use those figures to enter at the column of the actual expense. And you do this per tax. As I mentioned earlier, it was not just bulk establishment or materials bought for VSLA setup, but those materials were spelled out. Padlock, how much was budgeted, stamper, how much was budgeted. So you come to the column of the first item, how much was budgeted and how much did you actually spend on that line. You enter it there. You do that to the end of the last expense. Then when you do that, automatically the formula will calculate as usual and the total expenditure will come to the actual expense. The total expenditure will come there. So on this activity, when you come to the extreme right, you see so many sources of financing. You get the contribution from the 2 scale, the contribution from the BSS, and also the contribution from the cluster itself. So under this activity, how much did IFDC say they will contribute? You indicate the amount IFDC 2 scale indicated that they will contribute. You put it there. The BSS, under the description, setting up of VSLAs. So under that, you can also see in the budget that the cluster pledged that they were going to use their time as a contribution in setting it up, the time that they will waste in the setup. So the time that they will use in setting it up will be termed as the opportunity cost per this particular activity. So under that column 2, you will see an amount at the unit amount multiplied by the frequency, then at what rate. Then you see the total amount at the amount per task or sub-activity. So when you get to the various sources of financing, you go to the cluster portion. In most instances, clusters end up contributing whatever they had pledged to contribute. They don't normally, most often, they don't normally contribute more than that. So you pick the value that they pledge to contribute for this particular activity and record it under the cluster contribution column. And if, for instance, for this particular activity, the BSS contribution, maybe the BSS pledge to take care of the transportation needs to procure this item for the group. So how much was the cost of transport that was incurred in procuring these items? You record it under the BSS contribution. And when you make all these entries, automatically you will see the total, the grand total at the end of activity 1. So when that is done, you go to the private sector contribution financial. Then you look at the budget for our activity that we just implemented. We implemented activity 1, the setting up of VSLA. You go there, how much, was there any private sector contribution there? Yes, we have opportunity time, the opportunity cost of the time that the group members had used. So to make things very simple for you, don't type, you can just link it. Since all are in the same document, though in different sheets, you can just come under the description, you just put your equal sign there, go to your detailed financial reports and press enter there. The activity will just come there automatically. You need not to type to avoid making mistakes. Then after you've taken the description, you move to the budgeted amount for the opportunity cost or time. How much was budgeted for that? Again, don't type. Just place your cursor in that cell, type your equal sign and go to the detailed financial report. How much did they pledge? What was the total amount? You just click on it and press enter. You will see the budgeted amount for the opportunity cost. Again, here, other donors' contribution. I indicated that the BSS supported in facilitating in transportation for the procurement of the materials for the setup. So here too, you can just bring in your equal sign and go to the detailed financial report and go to the budgeted portion of the activity and press enter. the amount they have also pledged in transportation will automatically be picked. Then you are done with the budgeted column for the private sector. Then we are now at the expense column. We have the date of payment, then we have the reference of justification, then we have the variance. The amount is what I have explained earlier on, whatever amount they have pledged and whatever amount they have actually incurred. You enter it there. And when was that activity? We check your documents. When maybe the time they did the transportation, when was it? It could be in the form of a fuel receipt. What was the date on the fuel receipt? You quote it there. So here our justification will be fuel receipt for the BSS, and the justification for the actors' contribution maybe will be the attendance list. The group members can append their names and sign in the name of the activity 1, that is the setting up of the VSL list. Then the variance is the budgeted minus the actual amount they have incurred in implementing that activity. If the budgeted amount is more than what they have actually used, you will see a positive variance. But if the budgeted amount is less than what they have actually incurred, then you will see a negative variance, meaning that private sector has incurred more. And in most cases, when private sector incurs more, it's good for the group, it's good for the cluster. And under the notes, if you have any other remarks, you can put it there. Then from the PSC, we move to the financial report summary aspect. And on that, as usual, we have the grantee's name, that is in the BSS. You put in, for example, say Ghana, which country is it? It's in Ghana. Then the address, you type in the full address. Then the installments, as I indicated, we are dealing with the first tranche of payment. So you type in first tranche. Then when you come down, we have budget total approved. From the contract document, when you go to the budget column of the contract, you see the total budget for the agreement. You type it there in your local currency. So here we put into brackets Ghana cedi. Then the total column too, we put Ghana cedi there. So what was the budget? You look at your service agreement and pick it from there. After that, we now come down to advances. Don't forget that we are dealing with the first tranche of payment. So we don't have any cumulative from any previous payment. We are just starting fresh. So you leave the cumulative part and come down to advances received for the current reporting period. Before we started the implementation, we might have submitted our invoice requesting for payment for the first tranche. And IFDC 2 scale had done the payment. So you record the payment received from the 2 scale. Then when you come down, you see the total advances at hand at the beginning of the reporting period. And the total includes, if we were in maybe the reporting in the second tranche, we would have a cumulative from the first tranche. Then we add it to the current reporting tranche, and that will give us our total tranche. But here, because we are dealing with the first tranche, our total will still be the same as the advances received for the current reporting period. Then from there, we now come to our expenses. So here again, we have total expenses at the beginning of the reporting period. And once again, since we are just starting with the first tranche, we don't have cumulative expenses from previous tranche payment. So we are just starting afresh. So then the next item is expenses during the reporting period. So this is where we bring in our activities that we have implemented for this particular tranche. Example, the setting up that we have just done. So once again here, to avoid mistakes, you don't type, you can just bring in your equal, type in your equal sign and go to the detailed financial report, go to the description and pick the major activity. Click on the major activity and press enter. The activity will come there automatically. So after typing your activity, you come to the total in local currency once again. So here too, don't type. Bring your equal sign, go back to your financial report details and scroll down to the total, the grand total, since they were in various components, logs, passbooks and the rest. Don't pick it item by item, just scroll down to the grand total of the actual expense and click enter. So automatically the total amount will come there. So that is all for our expenses for this tranche. Then we go back, you will see the total expenses for the reporting period. Then the total expenses at the end of the reporting period. If we're having a cumulative expenses from previous tranche, it will have added to the current tranche and it will give us total. But since we are just starting from the first tranche, our total from the expenses from the reporting period will be the same total during the reporting period. Then you scroll down, and as you are entering the total expenses, it automatically deducts from the tranche that you have received, leaving the balance outstanding for you to spend at the end of the reporting period. Then when you scroll down, there's a portion for grantee contribution. And this is where our PSC comes in once again. Under the grantees contribution, we have a total partner contribution at hand at the beginning of the reporting period. And this portion for us, for now, is not relevant because we are dealing with the first tranche of payment. We don't have cumulative. So you leave that portion. Then move to B, that is the contribution of partner during reporting period. What was the contribution of the cluster during this current reporting period for our first tranche? Then you can just go to either your detailed financial reports, or you can pick that too from the PSA financials. And again, don't type to avoid making mistakes. Just bring in your equal sign, then go and click on the grand total of the PSC financials and press enter. So when you press enter, you see the total contribution from the private sector. And the C component is total partner contribution at the end of the reporting period. And again, since we are reporting for the first tranche, we have just two contributions, one from the cluster, then one from the BSS organization. Then when all this is done, you, the finance officer, you type in your name and your title, write the date, or if you want, you print it out, write the date and sign and submit it to the authorization officers and approval officers. They'll go through the reports one by one for the 3 templates. If they are okay with whatever you have done, then the officer in charge will also sign and write his title and the date. Then when everything is done, you scan these 3 templates and then submit to the 2Scale office. After you print out the various components of the financial report, you need to also prepare the certification letter and attach it to the report. In the certification letter, you attention it to the chief of party, and the subject will be certification letter from so and so cluster. Then the details of the certification letter, you pick that from the PSC contribution that you have already worked on. so that the totals that you see on the certification letter agrees with the totals in the PSC letter, after which you submit it to the cluster champion to sign. Then you print it on a letterhead and submit together with your other reports.
Working with TwoScale for 5 years, I made mistakes over the years, but at a point, with the support of the TwoScale office, I became, I can't say perfect, but I became very good. Your report or financial report is good as your source documents. And by source document, I mean your receipts, your invoices, your acknowledgement, your travel and transport documents. All those things make up the source documents. And you should have these good documents to be able to complete the financial report. What do I mean by good source documents? For example, your invoice should have a date, it should have a name for the organization that is purchasing, it should have the vendor's name and address, there should be an invoice number to be sure that such invoices don't repeat itself. Then the other details can come. The other details can be the quantity, the unit price, and the amount. Then if all that is done, then the person buying or purchasing the item should sign, and the manager should also sign. The manager of the vendor should also sign. Receipts, you also have the same. You should have the date, you should have the vendor's address, you should have the name of your organization or the one purchasing, but usually we use the name of the organization so that people don't bring their personal receipts inside. So you use the name of the organization. Then the amount must be written in words and in figures. Then there must be a description to say that we are paying for this item, or we are paying for stationery, we are paying for fuel, whatever. Then it should be stated clearly. You shouldn't also tamper with your receipts. You shouldn't alter the either words or figures in the receipts. If that is done, there will be problem, because it will not, there will be suspicion and other things that will not order well for the organization. So it's always good to have good and better receipts. And when you have these source documents, you now use that to prepare your report. So if your source documents are good, as I just explained, it means that whatever you are going to put into the system will also be good. So you take your time and make sure that everything is set before you key into the system. And by keying into the system, you make sure that figures, for example, if you had bought fuel and you have bought, say, stationery, and the amount that you use in buying exceeds what you budgeted for, you still need to explain under the receipt that this amount was used to buy fuel for this activity, maybe activity 1. You bought fuel costing so much. Activity 2, you bought fuel costing so much. So that the two activities can have the same receipt, but you must explain. If not, after all these receipts, after capturing all these receipts, you scan them activity by activity, and it will be forwarded to TwoScale. So when you are able to track all these things and you scan it activity by activity and forward it to TwoScale office, they will be able to understand better. But if you leave them blank, maybe activity 1 and activity 2 receipts are combined, it will be difficult for them to separate. And this will be clearly spelled out in the details of the financial reporting. I quickly will add that in the financial reporting, mistakes are avoidable if we take our time. But if we want to rush, and what I mean is we should not wait until we are about to send the reports, then we start gathering the receipts and gathering the information to be able to send the report. But as and when the receipts, as and when the activities are done, you should prepare yourself. You should start even scanning the receipts activity by activity, as I said, and save them as such, so that on the day of reporting, we have timelines that we are supposed to report. When the timelines come, then you submit. You use the reports that you have scanned to submit to the two-scale office. A good receipt must, one, have a date. It must have the name of the organization. It must have the amount in words. It must describe the activity you are carrying out. It must have the amount in figures, and it should be signed. However, in certain areas where we have operational difficulties, for example, a vendor might not have a receipt, it's important for the field officer to carry either honest certificate or acknowledgement of receipt from the office to the field for such activities to be receipted. The honest certificate must also have the name of the person receiving the money. It must have the description. It must have the amount, both in words and in figures. And it must describe the activity, just like the receipt. It must be signed by the one receiving the money and signed by the field officer who took the form to the field. And if possible, a column could be created for those in the office, for example, the finance office, for checking. It would be good. Finally, filing is as important as dealing with the reporting of the financial report. You have to make sure that whatever activity you carry out, when you receive all the receipts, you make sure you attach every receipt to the voucher from which that money was picked. So you make sure each voucher comes completely with all the receipts that follows it. And all these things must be filed activity by activity. If the activities, if you don't file them according to activities, it will be difficult for you, even as the officer in charge, to explain to an outsider who wants to be clear on some of the things that you have done. So it's very important to file them and to scan all that you have done, the two-scale project. That is, whatever receipt you have gotten, it must match with whatever activity that you said you were going to use it for. So that when you scan the receipts and make sure that you state it in your report that these scans I've made, they are for activity 1. These scans I've made, they are for activity 2. These scans I've made, they are activity 3. So that anybody taking it outside your office can easily have a clear understanding of what you have done. Co-finance officers, at this point, I would like to admonish you to take Excel serious, because these reporting formats are based on Excel, and it will help you a lot if you understand the nitty-gritties of Excel. We have already adapted it to work with other partners, and I will advise that we adapt it for other partners in your organization, and get along with your managers to understand the budget and move with it, because it will help if they understand the financial principles and understand the budget. It will make things simpler for us all. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have enjoyed this session, and I encourage you to help prepare a good and quality financial report. Thank you.